It is 6 o'clock, February the 21st, 2023. Welcome to the regular Commerce City Council meeting. I call the City Council to order tonight. We are very honored to have Pastor Dwight King of Friendship House of Praise Community Church, a non-denominational place of worship, joining us tonight. Pastor King has been pastor for almost 30 years and has lived in Commerce 65 years. He's been married 43 years to Miss Vivian King. Pastor King and Vivian have 2 girls, both raised in Commerce, and 5 grandkids. Pastor King, thank you so much for your service to this community. Please come to the podium if you would and lead us in a moment of invocation.
Got to bring it down because you can talk. Let us pray. Father in heaven, we thank you. We thank you for this day. We thank you for our health and our strength. And now, God, we pray for the city of Commerce. And we pray, God, that every speaker, we pray that you give them wisdom and give them knowledge. And let us be able to understand out of everything that's said and done this day. And God, we thank you. We give you the praise and we give you the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank God. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor King. We're also honored tonight. Our pledge is being brought to us by the Commerce Parks and Recreation 8 and under boys basketball team. The team is coached by the city's own Coach Ricky Brown. Coach Brown was born and raised in Commerce and graduated from Commerce High School in 1997. He then spent 7 years in the U.S. Army serving his country. We appreciate your service. Ricky graduated from Texas A&M in Commerce, Texas A&M Commerce in 2021, majored in sports, recreation, and management. Coach Brown currently serves as the recreation coordinator for the City Commerce Parks and Recreation Department. The boys 8 and under basketball team finished with a 5-3 record and made it to the quarterfinal round of the league playoffs. The players include Titan Miller, Riot Diamond, Paxton Shirley, Jamian Mabry, Grady Robber, Octavian Davis, Major Criswell, and Landry Mayu. Fellas, please lead us in the pledge. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for leading us in our praise tonight. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. You can see item A, acceptance of the minutes. Any questions about the acceptance of the minutes?
Mayor, I would like to move down item B, consent agenda for further discussion.
Okay. Do we have a motion to do I need a motion to move this, Molly? Nope, just going to move it?
Just move it.
Okay. All right, then we'll move it down. We want to put that with the city manager's report.
You can do it right after item number 5. You can actually do it before 5 if you want to. You can approve everything on consent, then we can discuss that item and take action and then move on.
All right, let's do that then. So do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda and the movement of item B?
I move that we accept the consent agenda and move item, what?
B.
Item B further into the agenda.
Down to after number 5 of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Let's look at item number B, consider and take action on. First one is a resolution authorizing an agreement between the Texas Department of Transportation and the City of Commerce for the temporary street closure of business 224 Main Street and Washington Street on May 25th, 2023 for a Rally Around Emma fundraising event. Mr. Lisenby.
Mayor, Council, we have a standing agreement with TxDOT since they control the right-of-way of a portion of Washington Street and Main Street as it travels through downtown. And so when we have events in the downtown area that require closure for safety and pedestrians, we have the ability to close those. We just have to document it as part of our agreement with TxDOT. And so this event that they're planning does look to use significant portions of the downtown. And so this is just the standard agreement with TxDOT that gives us the ability to put up barricades, redirect traffic, and alter the flow through that state right-of-way for the duration of this event. And so I believe representatives from the event were going to be here to talk and answer any questions that you might have.
Would you please come to the podium and give us your name?
My name's Erica Hawkins. Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
My name's Erica Hawkins. And you did say May. It is March. I just want to be clear on that, just so you do.
Right. Okay.
And do y'all?
So kind of give us a rundown of what you got planned for the day and how you see the crowd flowing and anticipated crowd, if you would, please.
So I really kind of took the Bodark Bash and just made it just like that. And we'll have vendors, but it won't be as many. And we'll have a concert, which will be in the same place as the Bash has theirs. And the vendors will be moved as close to that area as possible. And then as we contain more, it'll just go down. It won't be all the way down to the end of the streets, if like that way. And we will have food trucks. We will have an auction, silent and live. We will have 2 bounce houses. And I think that's a 5K in the morning, I'm sorry.
Okay, and what time does the 5K and where is it starting?
So it'll start in downtown, right here in this grassy area across the way. And then we will go the same route that the 5K for the dog park was ran. And then we'll
And
end
which
in-
Which is what?
Which is what?
Yeah.
1 second. I have a picture of it.
Generally that 5K starts, I believe, at City Park, they go down Aldridge, I think they come up Monroe, and then kind of swing over through downtown, and then loop back down Pecan, and then back over to City Park. They try to stay off of Park Street
Right.
because of the state highway there.
So we're starting now, we're going to start at downtown though, and we're going to end it in downtown.
Yes, that is correct. As soon as I find downtown.
So we're blocking off the streets for the 5K and
Well, we're blocking off the streets for the pedestrian traffic that will be going to the concerts and the vendors and things like that. And so we're proposing barricades right here on Alamo where Con connects, and then on Main Street, kind of in front of Little Bit, because the restaurants that are going to be
Right.
open and serving are contributing part of their revenues to this fundraiser. So we need people to be able to come in and park in those areas to visit those restaurants. So initially, the barricades would be proposed at Pecan and in front a little bit. That gives them plenty of room to have for their pedestrians and their stuff. And then should the vendors increase, we can slowly shift the barricade on Main Street down. But the goal is to provide parking for people to come visit the restaurants, because the restaurants are providing funding for the fundraiser. I guess our only request would be that the people that are participating in the 5K park over at the farmer's market in that big parking lot.
That
So
would be
the
fine.
Parking spots are reserved for people visiting the businesses that are going to get food that are going to contribute to the fundraiser. But that's typically how we get these things to flow.
On the flyer, and by the way, wonderful thing that y'all are doing, wholeheartedly, the whole community is behind this. But on the flyer, it does have that you're having a Jeep rally.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us where they are going to be and?
Yeah, so they were planning, like I said, not to have that many vendors to go all the way down, especially with such a short amount of time. We planned on them parking just in the parking spots in the back of, what is this?
Right here in front of this, right here, Alamo?
It can be on Alamo or what's that next street over?
Main
That's
Street.
Main
Or Main
Street.
Street.
Main Street, we would we would suggest having them meet and park also at the farmer's market. There's a huge parking lot over there. It's gonna be easier for them to get in and out, and then when they leave as a group, there's a direct shot out of town and back in.
Okay.
And so there's a wide open parking lot there that they can unload. Some of them probably bring in on trailers. Some of them may just drive in.
Okay.
We can meet afterwards, but there's a
And that's
staging
fine.
area
We're open to
on an
any
alley that would be very
suggestions.
convenient.
Okay, and so where does the rally start for the Jeeps?
So they're really just gonna start at Walmart and just in a line drive down here, and that's really it. And then park, and then they come and participate in the event like anybody else would. They just shop and get food, listen to the music, things like that. And then that's really it.
And what
They-
time are they starting?
They're starting at 12.
Okay.
They just wanna, because you have to participate, like you pay to participate in the Jeep rally, so they wanted to show support in that way.
Okay.
Exactly, do you know how many food truck vendors there will be, and have we?
Right now, we just have one.
Okay, because at some point there has been some electrical issues, you know, that we just make sure that we get that,
Yes.
that you're aware of that and test it prior to.
Okay, absolutely.
Exactly how are you raising funds? I mean, are you getting portions of the vendors, and what type of vendors are you getting?
So it'll be, the type of vendors would be pretty much anybody that sells, but we put a cap on categories. So like tumblers, for instance, that's a huge thing right now, and there's millions of people that do it. So we would only have like 4 or 5, depending on how many vendors we actually have. So there's not a bunch of those. And then you have your boutiques. You have, we actually have a lady that makes fishing reels, and so she'll be here. To answer your question about the money that we're getting, so all of it goes to the family. So the vendor fee, which is $75.
Okay.
All of that is already connected to the bank account that we have set up for the foundation, and it goes straight to her.
Okay,
How many vendors do you anticipate?
Honestly, I'm not sure. Right now, we're only at 20,
Okay.
and we only have a month left. So it shouldn't be that many more. I
You're
really
at
don't-
20, you're at
Good.
20 now?
Yes.
That's
You
a
got-
pretty good
That's a
number.
good- yeah.
You
I'm
have
sorry,
a cutoff date?
It'll be a week before, for sure. I can move it up. And if y'all are opposed to any numbers that we don't want to exceed, I know how many will fit. I've talked to Paul Voss with the chamber, and he told me that 160 will fit, but we are not anticipating that number at all of vendors. That's a lot to get in that short amount of time, and people are already booked on other events as well.
20 is a pretty good number. I would be
All right.
proud of that.
Exactly. That is a good number.
Okay, last question from me. Have you talked to our public safety officers as far as the routes and,
We've reviewed the 5K route.
okay. Again, thank you, very,
If we have future events, are you for hire for?
I am an event planner, actually, but I did not do this with my business, so.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mayor, since y'all pulled both items as part of B, did y'all have any questions about the appointment of Chief Bassam as the Emergency Management Coordinator? Okay, so then whatever action you take on B
We both.
includes both of those bullets.
So I believe we need a motion to approve both bullets of item B.
I move that we accept, or that we approve the resolution authorizing the agreement between the Department of Transportation and the City of Commerce for the temporary closures and the appointment of the Fire Chief, Chris Bassham, as the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Commerce.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 5, presentation to the City Council by members of the public to be conducted as close to 6:05 as possible with a 3-minute limit per person. Public comments will cease at 6:20. This period is reserved for citizens to discuss items not on the listed agenda. The response to the public comments will be limited to 1, a statement of fact or policy, direction to take up the issue with a city staff member, or an offer to place the item on a future council agenda. I do have one card tonight, so Ms. Vickers, if you would please come forward and provide your name and address, please, and then you may address the council.
Sandra Vickers, and I live at the Commerce Housing Authority property at 427A Lily, that's here in Commerce. And I've come here tonight to discuss some issues that I'm having. I came in here back in August to discuss some issues that I was having at Commerce Housing Authority, and nothing has ever been resolved. And I just provided some documents there to these gentlemen because I'm being evicted from this property for telling the truth. I reported Commerce Housing Authority to HUD regarding the illegal drug trafficking and prostitution, drug dealers living on the property, and there has been a great deal of retaliation against me for coming forward because I have to, as a citizen, if I'm a witness to crime, it's my responsibility to speak up. And so I am being evicted from this property for telling the truth. And I have received a letter from the Commerce Housing Authority that requires me to call the Commerce Police Department when I have a problem. I have a letter from them that tells me I have to do that. Okay, the Commerce Police Department is mad at me because I keep calling them. And Commerce Housing Authority is mad at me because they don't want to hear my problems. They have referred me in that letter a year ago that I have to call them. And they don't want to do anything, and Commerce Housing doesn't want to do anything. And I'm being poisoned with pesticides because there's people on the property that are mad at me for turning in these drug dealers and prostitutes. They don't like me. I can't help it. I had to do what I had to do because I had to be honest. I had to tell the truth. And Rebecca Rouse, she has threatened to evict me before, last July. I've given them a document over there with a letter where she is threatening to evict me because of my conduct, because I called the police on a drug dealer that was threatening to assault me. And an officer by the name of Oakley insinuated that I may be a little bit senile. He says that I'm imagining. He says he believes I'm imagining that I smell pesticides. Okay, I am a former private investigator. I have worked with the FBI. I do not have a mental illness. These are my copy of my FBI fingerprints. I do not lie, and I do not have a mental illness. Yet I'm being evicted for telling the truth. And the Commerce Police Department is mad because they don't want me calling them. And that is their job because Commerce Housing pays them. But they don't want to do their job. I am being poisoned with pesticides. It's being sprayed in my air conditioning unit, up in the attic, and in my walls. Because forgive me for saying the word black, but that's not racist. That's just a description of skin color. I'm black. The people live next to me are black. They do not like me because, like I said, I reported these drug dealers to HUD. And I'm being punished for it. I'm being punished for telling the truth. And I'm being evicted, which is not right. Because in my lease agreement, it says that I have a right to live there in peace and quiet. And I have never been there on this property for 19 months, and I've never had one day of peace and quiet. My car is destroyed with lacquer and pesticides sprayed all over it. I've got lacquer all over my windshield. My windshield wipers are stuck to my windshield because of lacquer. They sprayed lacquer on my windshield. They're spraying pesticide up in my engine. I could not even use my heater during the winter because all it does is blow pesticide. And I could not use my heater in my apartment because all it does is blow pesticide. Commerce Housing Authority protects this. They're I'm supposed to be talking with this. I wanted to make very clear that Commerce Housing Authority, these employees are absolutely incompetent. And I don't care if any of y'all agree with me, because I'm going to keep reporting all of this, because I know that this property is being used to funnel money. These people, yeah, I know the City of Commerce needs revenue, and that's exactly what you're using it for. And they are mad at me, but I have a right to tell the truth. And I thank y'all for letting me speak.
Appreciate your time tonight, Ms. Vickers. Do we have anybody else? Mr. Jack Welch, please come to the podium if you would, and let everybody know the role that you're here playing tonight.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, City Council members, thank you for allowing me to say a few words. My name is Jack Welch, and I'm president of America's Drug-Free Productions. We just wanted to come forward tonight on behalf of America's Drug-Free Productions, the Heart of Texas Bowl, and our director, Blake Cooper, who could not be here this evening. Wanted to come and just say thank you for your dedication and your help. I'm looking at folks like Becky and a whole bunch of folks that helped us with our Heart of Texas Bowl. We had a very successful event. This was the second year that we held it in Commerce, and we have a commemorative ball that we'd like to hand you. Our city
Mr.
manager
Lisenby, if you would
come on down here.
accept on our behalf, please.
It says City of Commerce, in appreciation for your support of the Tips USA Champs Heart of Texas Bowl of December 3rd, 2022. Thank you so much for your support. We do thank you so very much.
Thank you, Jack. That was a great event. We appreciate your leadership in that organization. Do we have anybody else that wishes to address the council tonight? All right, that being said, we'll move on to council comments, item 6 on the agenda. Mr. Henry, any comments?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Councilman Miller?
Well, on behalf of the Commerce Leadership Institute Board, we'd like to thank the city and the city employees for sponsoring or dedicating 2 days of their time, taking around the class of 2023. Is greatly appreciated, and I know several people had a lot of questions and were really improved on what they saw about the city.
Excellent. Councilman Thompson?
Nothing this evening.
Councilman Ayers?
Nothing this evening.
All right. Mr. Lisenby, any comment from you?
Nope, good.
All right. Thank you very much. Item 7, we have Dr. Cephas Archie, who is en route at this moment. So we're going to skip over item 7 at this time and move over to item 8. We'll give Ms. Molly a few minutes to move through some slides here. All right. Item 8, discussion and possible action on the approval of a task authorization number 3 and number 4 with Freeze and Nichols related to street improvement projects for FY 2023 and 2024. Mr. Lisenby, City Manager.
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to present this tonight. We were looking back through the notes. I think it was back in fall of 2021 when we first started presenting an approach to city reconstruction of our streets as part of our capital improvements programs. And at that time, we had contracted with Freeze and Nichols to do an evaluation and help us do some prioritization of project needs. We were looking at criteria such as traffic counts and development potential. And so we looked at a number of streets and the traffic counts that they follow, and then looked at the conditions and created kind of a short list of streets that we would begin to reconstruct. The first batch of streets, we currently are wrapping up design right now, most likely put those streets out to bid for construction by May That will include reconstructing Washington Street from Live Oak all the way down to Culver. It will include some chip seal maintenance on Monroe from Live Oak down to Walnut. It will reconstruct a portion of Park Street. Park Street primarily is controlled by TxDOT, but beginning at City Park at Maple Street and south across Aldridge and then on to Culver is city controlled. And so we're going to look at reconstructing that portion of Park Street. And then there's a couple of blocks of Hickory Street. So those 4 street segments are, we're wrapping up design now and getting ready to bid that out. Construction will happen in this calendar year for that first batch of streets. After that, we had a series of street projects that we were going to tackle based on both traffic volume, street need, stormwater need, and potential development. And so we had looked at Monroe initially starting at Culver, traveling south all the way to Charity. That street also has high traffic counts. It's in poor condition, and there's not adequate stormwater drainage to manage stormwater flows through that portion of town. With the addition, at the very end of Monroe is some of the limited property that we have that is open and available for residential construction. And so that was a project that we felt would return significant investment to the community. So that was supposed to be in the second set of streets that we reconstructed. However, when we put that list together, we didn't anticipate East Oak Creek subdivision, which is the Bloomfield Homes, which in phase 1 is 110 new homes over by Commerce Elementary. Once it's completely built out, that's 270 homes over by Commerce Elementary. Any parents that drop off kids at Commerce Elementary in the morning or pick them up in the afternoon understand that traffic is significantly challenging around that establishment. And so if we add 110 residents or 270 residents and don't improve traffic flow around the elementary school, that will create an unsafe condition. And so we've actually delayed Monroe and inserted Sterling Heart, which is the eastern part of Sterling Heart. We want to completely rebuild, widen, and reconfigure stormwater flows at Sterling Heart, and a portion of Oak Lane that goes up to Highway 11. And so the agreement we have with Friesen Nichols for engineering services, we have a master service agreement that we've entered into, and then as we start authorizing projects, it's done by task authorization. And so what we're looking to do is initiate 2 task authorizations, and I'll try to communicate the scheduling. Task authorization 3 is to design and construct East Sterling Heart and Oak Lane. And so if you time that out, if we start design in this calendar year, you're probably not going to see construction until 24 at the earliest. And so we want to go ahead and start that engineering now so that when next calendar year rolls around, we're ready to start construction. That's task authorization number 3, and that has a cost of $586,650 to do the engineering, and it also includes some potential right-of-way acquisition if we widen Sterling Heart. Task authorization 4 is for the engineering associated with the Monroe Street project. We're actually looking to start at Walnut, north of Culver, go through Culver, and then down all the way to Charity. And we want to go ahead and start that engineering now, recognizing that construction for that segment's probably not going to happen until 2025. But if we do the engineering for Sterling Heart and then do the construction for Sterling Heart and then start the engineering for Monroe, that's probably 9 months of engineering. Well, we want to go ahead and start the engineering now so that when we get to 2025, that's already completed and we can just roll right into construction for that next segment of streets, so that we continue to have momentum for our investments and the improvements we're making in our street network. So task authorization 3 is proposed in the amount of $586,650. That's the design and construction administration for East Sterling Heart and Oak Lane. Construction will likely be in 2024. And then task authorization 4 in the amount of $670,920 is engineering services associated with Monroe That construction will most likely happen in 2025. These two authorizations together total $1,257,570, and staff is recommending approval of those two authorizations. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, I've got some questions,
'Kay.
as usual. All right. So I know we needed to move the Sterling Heart and Oak up. So what are we taking in place? It was going to be Monroe, and so now we've moved that to the second. So then what is the one that we were going to have second?
Monroe was
Passed.
Monroe was going to be in the second packet.
Right, but what came in, I mean, now, because we were talking about, now we moved up Sterling Heart. That was never in the package.
That wasn't
either.
in the initial conversation.
So what was the one behind the Monroe Street?
You have,
did we bump?
Yeah, what did we bump?
so when we did the initial evaluation, we identified the streets that are in packet one. At your desk, this will be part of our conversation later on project updates. This is a copy of our 5-year CIP plan. And so the first group of streets was intended to be what we're starting construction on this year: Washington, Hickory, Park, and Monroe. The second group was to be Monroe Street. Then third and fourth was some configuration of Charity west of Monroe, Charity east of Monroe, and then looking at Washington Street south of Culver, because there's stormwater concerns as well as street quality. I don't know that the Washington Street would be a full reconstruction. We could probably just resurface and align stormwater. So those were the first kind of 5 projects that we had looked at on our list. By inserting East Sterling Heart and Oak Lane, we've basically bumped everything a year.
Okay, so the cost of us, and beg my ignorance here, so we're doing the design, and let's look at Washington Street.
Sure.
All right, so we've got the design. We know we're going to go out and bid for the construction of it, and that construction is going to be just 1.1 million?
No, we've got $2,750,000 set aside for those 4 projects.
Well, that's what I'm just saying, on Washington. I mean, are we sure that that's going to end up being just that?
Well,
With as much as we have on Washington Street?
when you add the utilities, so that number is given to us by the engineers as they're doing their design. They give us an opinion of probable cost. And so that's estimated paving construction. If you go further down the page, you'll see under the utility fund, Washington Street utilities, because we've got to replace water and sewer underneath Washington at the same time we resurface it. That's an additional $1 million to $1.5 million to replace the water and sewer line, but that's funded from the utilities fund, not from the general fund. So Washington Street all in is probably going to be $2.5 million, partially funded for the street reconstruction and partially funded from the utility replacement. And that's funding that's been allocated.
Okay.
People want to know why Commerce hasn't done streets.
I know,
It's because it's expensive.
I know, that's,
And-
my concern though is for me to sit down, I'd like to have it whiteboarded out for me so I can really understand it. And being able to understand that nothing's ever come in under budget or on budget. I
Right.
mean, as much as we try, nothing is being able to do that. And so I have a fear that we're gonna be out there already designing something that's going to be, we're gonna have to wait to do something on when we really need that money now or in the next year.
Right, but whatever project you want to do now or next year requires engineering services.
I understand.
And so-
That's why I need to have it more, I'm a little concerned about how much money we're gonna be obligating ourselves for the citizens to make sure that when I vote, I know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Or that I'm voting with confidence.
Well,
Right now, I don't.
Well, the capital improvements plan that we adopted as part of the budget process shows $3 million in 2024 and $4 million in 2025 of dollars that we're committing to invest in our street system. And so,
But that's design, there's a lot of that is design.
well, some of that's design and some of that's
Some of it's
construction.
construction.
And so design is probably 9 months of time. And so we're starting that time on 2 sets of street projects. We're only going to construct one of them first. And the second one, which would be the Monroe section, will be constructed. That construction activity will most likely happen in 2025.
And where do we find the money if we are over budget on Washington Street?
Okay, so we've got $2,750,000 for construction of those 4 projects. When the bids come in, if they're overbid, we also have funding out of fiscal '23 for streets. And so we've got some cash available. It was intended for the second batch. We can use those funds and cover the cost of the first phase of street construction. Once design's done and we see what pricing is, when it comes time to issue in 2024, we can adjust how much we issue at that point. But we can't construct it if it isn't designed. And so all we're asking for is to start the design process because it's lengthy.
Do we need to maybe table this for 2 weeks until we get into our workshop and discuss it in greater detail?
If you want to workshop this, we can.
I think we do.
The first week.
2 weeks is not going to hurt us on a 9-month
Yeah.
design
I-
process.
I mean, I
So-
just would
Figure
feel
it out.
more comfortable for us to be able to make sure that we're doing this with our eyes open, we know exactly where it is, so that whenever I'm stopped on the street and saying, why is this street being done this way, when this is why it has, and how much it's gonna cost us.
Sure.
So that's why the next streets are gonna have to be pushed out a little bit, or whatever. And so I'd like to table this item.
Make a motion to table.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion to table carries. Thank you very much. Item number 9, presentation of the 2022 Racial Profiling Report in compliance with the Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 2.131, Article 2.138. Discussion and acceptance of the same. Calais Belitz, Interim Police Chief.
So in your packet, you should have a racial profiling report. Information in this report pertains to vehicle stops, citations, issues, and if arrests were made. You'll find information related to race, whether a search was conducted, whether the individual detained consented to the search, or if the peace officer knew the race of the individual detained prior to making the stop, if physical force was used by the injury occurred, location of the stop, reason for the stop, if contraband was discovered during the search. If y'all have any questions about it, I'd like for the report to stand as is. But I'm available for questions.
Do we have any questions for the chief?
Clay, are these numbers pretty consistent year after year as far as the,
There's a little bit of fluctuation.
Any other questions? Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the report?
I make the motion to approve the report.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I,
All opposed, like sign. Thank you very much, Chief. All right. Item 10, presentation of the CO Series 2023 Plan of Finance by Hilltop Securities.
From Hilltop. We were just talking on the phone, we never see each other in person. But he's going to give you, our plan of finance for the Series 2023 bonds. That the next item is our notice of intent, to go out for. This is not an action item. This is just information for you for our Series 2023 bond, which, ironically enough, is for funding for streets. The animal shelter, and also for the water sewer infrastructure, that is on, county's projects spreadsheet that we just showed you moments ago. Turn it on up.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mayor, Council, good afternoon. I'll walk you through the plan of finance. I know you're just discussing streets and certain projects, and here's the plan of finance that we've been working on with Ms. Campbell and Mr. Lisenby dating back to fall of 2021. And when we got to working more closely on this plan of finance was last summer when you moved forward with some of your CIP, and you've been tackling it in different phases. So this phase is something we started looking at last year in terms of how much we're going to grow in terms of our tax base, and then how much we can fund within the current budget for streets and roads. And the animal shelter, I understand that's the final component of the animal shelter project, and then funding of water and sewer infrastructure. The way this works is the city, should the city decide to move forward with this plan of finances, you would issue certificates of obligation, the same process you did last year. It's actually very close to that plan of finance, which is you're doing 2 repayment sources, $3 million in terms of funding for streets, roads, and animal shelter components. That's repaid for by your debt service tax component of your overall tax rate. That's within the current tax rate that you currently have. So this is structured such that it does not impact the current budget and the tax rate, right? That's where your capacity is. Where does that come from? You grew 21% last year in terms of your tax base. So that further opens you up to be able to fit this and not have to go above that. That's something Ms. Campbell is working with us very closely, that it has to fit there. That's $3 million of the entire issuance. The entire issuance is $6.5 million. You'd be funding $3 million with debt service taxes, $3.5 million for water and sewer infrastructure funded out of your utility system revenues. Your system is healthy. It's strong in terms of revenues. You're able to cover that with looking at your existing audited revenues from your most recent audit, you're able to cash flow these new projects over a 20-year period without an impact to that budget, right? After paying maintenance and operating expenses, after paying for existing debt, you're still able to cash flow the 3.5. So overall, no impact to your utility rate structure as you have it. Overall funding to the city at closing, you'd be getting $6.5 million net proceeds to the city. Again, 3 on the debt service tax side, 3.5 on your utility system. Same process as last year. We would go through your rating. You are a A+ issuer. We did tell the rating agencies that the city was looking at this back in last summer. So they're aware this is coming. When we approach them this time around, should you decide to move forward with this timing, we have a strong expectation that you'll continue to have your A+ rating. On top of that, you got a AA insurance on your last year's certificates of obligation. We'll be going for that out again this year around, meaning you, on top of your A+ rating, you'll have an A, you're likely to have an AA rating on those certificates of obligation. This is not the same interest rate environment we saw last time over here. You may tell that there's inflation out there. We are adding 0.5% to the interest rate indications that you have here. So when we look at how we're looking at this in terms of interest rates, we're saying what's today's rate plus 0.5%. That's, for those of you that are cash flow inclined, we have that in the footnotes, but we're looking at a 4.1% interest rate with our budget. We did lose some interest rate movement today. It's going to be the same going forward until inflation is under control, but this does fit within your budget. What we tell our clients is, if you're in a good financial situation and it works within your budget, let's not wait to see what interest rates are going to do moving forward, because based on what we hear from economists between now and the rest of the year, rates are not likely to come down. Maybe they'll plateau. But if you're ready to move forward, it's a good time. There's strong demand for A+ rated paper, such as the City of Commerce. You'll get strong participation. You'll get strong bids. You'll get a market rate, which is ultimately what you want if you move forward. You'd be taking final action on April 18th. That's when we would come back here and say, Mayor Council, here are the bids you received. Here's the low bid. It's a tax-exempt bid for the 20 years of the debt obligations. And then you'd be closing on May 16th, at which point you'd have the funds in the city's accounts. Any questions? This is a 20-year debt issuance with a 10-year prepayment date. same exact process that you did last year, which was also 20-year with a 10-year prepayment option.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you very much.
you.
Appreciate your time. Thanks for driving over. Well, I can see that Dr. Archie made it safely to Commerce tonight. So we're honored to have you. Folks, let me introduce Dr. Cephas Archie, Texas A&M University of Commerce Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Guess I need to hold that. Testing, okay. Good evening, how are we? Good. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you. Howdy, I promise I won't take too much of your agenda this evening. I am Dr. Archie. I am Cephas Archie. I currently serve as the Vice President for Inclusion for this evening, and I have to, for the university, but I have to this evening start by apologizing to you all. Yes, for traveling and being late, but more so for taking so long to come spend some time with you. As the Vice President for Inclusion, I got here, my first day of work was last March 20th. And so I've been here almost a year. And I had not made time to speak with you as a governing body. And so I have met with many of you independently in different auxiliaries and organizations, et cetera, but formally to sit down and have some time with you about my work and my commitment and my alignment with many of the things that you do every day. I should have been here sooner. So in my role as the Vice President for Inclusion, my first, I think, week at the university, I requested meetings with both the superintendent of the school district as well as the mayor of the city at that time. And about 3 months in, the president called me in and he said, so I'm trying to figure out, why did you do that? Who told you to go and do that? So I referred to my job description. And I said, in order for us to successfully maintain the things that you've hired me to do, we will not be able to do it alone. And so therefore, we must begin this work with looking at the partners who we share the commitment to this work to be able to move it forward. He has never asked that question again. But I state that with the transparency of saying that it is a humble opportunity for me to be here. And I look forward to building those relationships and those partnerships with you that not only begin today, or for many of them that continue today, but that extend into who we will be, who we say we wish to be, not only as a university, but as a city and also as a school district. And so I'll go through a few of these things, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. Howdy, you can give me the look if I take too much time. So if you look at this picture highlights the person who you see standing in front of you. If you look at that interesting little kid in the back on the right-hand side, yeah, that's me. That's me. And the focus of me wanting to share this photo with you is to remind many of you that I came from a place just like Commerce. I came from a small town where there were people who cultivated in me the things that I did not yet know were capable. They were black, they were white, they were women, they were Muslim, they were Jewish, they were older, they were of different faiths, of different communities, they were poor, they were wealthy, they were local, they were regional, they were statewide. But the ability to recognize that who I am today started in places and the opportunities like this, that it is people like yourself who championed me having the opportunities that I have been afforded. And so if it started with me and I can be a testament of what that could be, then I have to go back and find the people who did it for me to encourage them to continue to do it for others. And that's why my role is so significant in the work that I've led and the success that I've had has been all the partnerships and collaboration that have come to work with leaders such as yourself. And many of you, even to my right, hello Chris, know me personally from the detailed work that we do. So my leadership style sort of looks at sort of an approach that builds on who we are. It builds off of the talents, the individual skill sets. It builds off the needs, the histories, the cultures that we individually bring to the table that make us larger, one amazing body. It builds upon who we have been. It builds on who we are, but also looks forward to say, who do we wish to be in the future? And how are we cultivating the individual strengths and talents that we bring to the table to operationalize that as we move forward? And so recognizing the influence of my work, what I do understand is that leaders become great not because of their individual power, but because of the ability to empower others. So as much as I am the Vice President for Inclusion, I made it very clear to the President upon his hire to me that if this work was to ever be successful, it will never be successful because Cephas Archie said so. It will never be successful because Cephas Archie goes into the community and works with faculty and works with staff and works with students. But it is the ability to recognize that we each have a commitment to this work. How are we remaining inclusive and creating space for all of our members who reflect it throughout our community? Being intentional with thinking about the communities that are not reflected, and how are we being proactive with saying, how are we thinking about what they will need to be successful before they arrive, not when they get here? And so to this point, what do I do? What's my role at the university? Well, I'm not in any individual bucket. I'm not just with faculty, although I do assist in our curriculum and our content and our culturally relevant pedagogy and our research and all of the fundraising and all of the programming and the training and the hiring and the retention and the professional development, all of the community work, all of the research, all of the expectations, all of the review processes and evaluation. It is all considered a part of the work that I am charged to help lead, so that in every aspect of what we say we are and who we wish to be, we are always asking ourselves, who is missing from our tables? And that is intentional with making sure that everything we do, we are remembering that we are better when there is room for everyone at our tables. Referencing that, our strategic plan is called Educate, Discover, and Achieve. 3 simple words that highlight the focus of who we are as an institution. And so upon my arrival to the institution, I was very deliberate with saying I appreciate this focus, very succinct, very clear, and very direct. With that, there are 5 major priorities, strategic priorities, that highlight who we are as an institution. Of those 5, 2 I am here to kind of focus on with you tonight, and that is 3 and 4, which is to create an inclusive community characterized by respect and collaboration, and the alignment of our initiative to support our unique rural-urban identity. So I can't even imagine us trying to fulfill these obligations without you, these strategic priorities without you. We will fail without you, without a doubt. And so if this is a part of our strategy for developing an institutional culture and climate, then we must build it and do it together. So I added 1 word to educate, discover, and achieve. And it asks the context of who is responsible for it. And that's all of us. That's every member of the internal community of the university, but that is also the people who we work alongside with every day. We will rebuild and we will build together, demolishing and disbanding our silos that we have created, which have given us this false sense of control and power that we never had, not realizing that the very same mistakes that we have repeated from the past have kept us from advancing forward. And so to this context, this word, and I say this with chuckle today because I've since the last year I've been repeating together, 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 together throughout the state, that even at the university everyone sees me and he's like, yes, we know, Dr. Archie, together, together. Yeah, that's the way I want us to build. But it was also quite comical as I passed up billboards today coming from Austin, Texas. There were billboards that said Baylor University, building together. I said, oh, I wonder where they got that from. But I appreciate and I encourage others to adopt that together brand, because it is not the silos that will allow us to be successful, but building together. At the university, when I came in, there's a focus of defining it. So what is inclusion? And so at our university, we took some research. And research means we brought together even the City of Commerce, we brought together the Commerce Independent School District, and the internal stakeholders of the university, as well as our Dallas campuses, and said, if we're gonna have this diversity, equity, inclusion, and access work, what we do know that depending on the lane that you come from, or the seat that you've sat in, or the community that you may have had exposure to or lack thereof, many people define these things to be many different things. And so as an institution, we've made it our priority to actually give them meaning. Because how do you assess that which you cannot define? How do you define that which you have not given meaning? And so from an inclusion standpoint, it says the A&M Commerce community defines inclusion as the intentional practice of facilitating opportunities for full engagement of all women, all genders, all races, all faiths, all disabilities, all military personnel, all socioeconomic classes, all international status, is that when we say we are committed to being inclusive of all, we mean all. Actualizing the advantages of a diverse and collaborative community. Collaborative leadership, individual ownership is sort of the mantra I lead with. That said, we all have a role and a responsibility to lead in this work, recognizing the individual areas where we have ownership. So when you think about our institution's efforts to say we wish to recruit, we wish to retain, we wish to support those all communities. The experience of my faculty, the experience of our staff, the experience of our students when they go to the local restaurants and vendors impacts my ability to keep them as faculty, staff, and students. Their experience when visiting the gas stations and the libraries and the lovely downtown. The experience that they have when they go to the local houses of faith and the many different services, their engagement with law enforcement and fire department, impact our ability to keep them in commerce, to keep them not only as students, but as members of your community. And so for me not to recognize that if we're going to build, that I need you to build with me, I am being negligent in my duties as a leader. If I am not being intentional with empowering you to say we are a major stakeholder to the success of every student, faculty, and staff member at Texas A&M University Commerce. So why is this important? Many of you have seen this slide of mine. I like to give a little deeper meaning of things. So yes, when you meet people, you meet individuals, you meet auxiliaries, you always see these physical attributes, the body language, the facial expressions, etc., the gestures, right? And that's sort of the surface level. What is more meaningful is all the stuff you don't see every day. All the many ways in which you connect with our faculty. You connect with our students. You connect with our alumni. You connect with our executive leaders. And so although we don't see these things on a daily basis, these are the things that connect us across race, across class, across ability status. And so the meaningfulness behind the work is also as important of recognizing the outcomes of the work. I'm later going to show you a slide of an event that I went to about a couple of years ago that was called a Walk a Mile program. And a Walk a Mile program is a program that's held most often in Domestic Partner Violence Awareness Month, right? So most affiliated with Title IX, so sexual harassment on women who are most often the victims, etc. And so the Walk a Mile program, as a symbolic nature or symbolic gesture of awareness, says walk a mile and what it means to be a woman. As a symbolic gesture, knowing that as a male I can never really understand that, but to say that I am aware of the plight of the experience when it comes to domestic partner violence and most of the victims being women, I am aware. And there was a small woman speaker who got up at the event, and she said, to all the men that are here, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that you've taken the time to acknowledge the plight of what it means to be women. She said, however, if you are only here because you are thinking about your daughters, because you are thinking about your wives and your mothers and your sisters, do me a favor. If that's the only reason why you're here, stay home next time. What about the people who don't have daughters? Should they not care? What about the people who don't have sisters? Should they not have any value for women? So if our only reason for doing these things is because we have a self-invested interest of the people that we love and care about that are a part of our lives, then you miss the whole point of what this work is purposed to be about. And so the reason why I share this slide is because it's the intentional and deliberate nature that says, why do we really do it? Is it right to do for all people, whether we are part of those communities or not? And so as a male who sat in that audience, I was convicted. And I said, yeah, that was me. Because I recognize that the responsibility is more than just to the communities that I serve and be a part of. And that's that concept of intersectionality that says, yes, I may be black and I may be male, but I also may be a Christian. I may be black and male, but I also grew up as a member of the lower socioeconomic class. And so I'm more than just what you see. And so often when I talk about these things and I deliver these presentations, many people always follow up by saying, you spoke my truth. And so although you may not see it and you may not be aware of it, I'm certain that this is many of your truths in this room. And so to this component, this is where this work must capture us all. We must be deliberate in saying, how are we intentionally building structures that says, as we make decisions, are we intentionally and strategically including our partners? And where we build, and what we fund, and how we allocate, what we prioritize. Are we committed to the silos just in word or in deed only? Have we demonstrated through our actions that as an institution we are committed to leading that? I acknowledge that we have not always been most efficient at it. And that is why I began tonight with an apology by saying I should have been at your doors, not just the mayor's, not just at Howdy's, but at you as a governing body, at your door saying, I'm here to work. Because the work that I do cannot be successful without the people that I am standing in front of now. Several examples of this, and I'm going to close it out momentarily. Several examples of this is so we've developed something called a community climate task force. Because when I said I want to move it forward, I'm not just talking about and sitting together in a circle, holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and said it's all work. No, that's not how this works for me. Our actions must demonstrate it. And so we've developed a community climate task force that allows us to embed the city. Thank you, Chris, for sitting on that task force. That looks at what are the priorities that we've identified as a community that are threats to our culture and climate. That if we are not being not only reactionary, but proactive by saying how are we protecting ourselves from the things that if we are not clear, that we are not observing them, if we are not on top of them, have the ability to absolutely tear us apart. You know, we can spend millions of dollars investing in building bridges, but it takes one poor response to one thing to tear it all down. Everything we've built for decades can be that vulnerable. Peace is truly fragile. And so recognizing that as leaders, we have a duty and a commitment to say we will lean into this mindset of doing it together. Not only for ourselves and our roles as leaders, but for the people who we may never see every day that will be impacted by the decisions that we make. And so this community looks at data. It looks at the number of police reports from both the city and the university. It looks at the mental health number of reports that we've had and what our response times were. What are the needs? Are there enough resources? It looks at the number of discrimination complaints. It looks at the number of Title IX and sexual harassment type complaints. It looks at the a number of accommodation requests that we've received. It looks at the needs of our veterans, et cetera. So that as a community, we are prioritizing what not only our 4 priorities that we need to be responding to, but also how is both the city and the university working together to say, this is what we will do in response to those community priorities. I am humbled to say that Howdy, as well as Chief Bassam, have been instrumental in sitting at a part of this table that says this is what we are going to do as the city for committing to these responsibilities. Because we recognize that your students are our students too. Your employees are part of our community too. And so to this point, I'll even ask, and Howdy is doing so now, to distribute what those priorities were so that you have a physical copy of saying, this is what that task force defined as things we need to be responding to now. So that as a community, we are having our collaborative leadership yet our individual ownership to saying the things that we are prioritizing as our needs, how are each of us putting our hand to the table to say this is what we commit to doing about it. Additionally to that, these are all the different areas, as we talked about, that sit on that task force. So data that looks at our student and faculty experience, University Police, the City of Commerce Public Safety, SGA, Title IX, Civil Rights, Student Conduct, Student Counseling, Faculty Ombudsperson, HR. So the people who collect data and have a good pulse check on how we're doing as an institution, how we're doing as a community, so that we are monitoring annually where we are, but also how are we responding to where we wish to be. And so to this, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of some of the things that we are already doing. I'll give this last example because I could sit here for about 2 hours and give you examples. My last example is to recognize the tragedy that occurred almost around about a year ago now in Uvalde. The investigative reports have come out and talked and been very clear that a part of the many efforts of failure was the silos created amongst law enforcement. How there was no plan in place that when a certain type of emergency safety situation happened, this is the coordinated effort of how the multiple law enforcement entities would work together. There was no training together of those law enforcement entities. There was no identified communication platform that each of them had access to that made sure that the left hand knew what the right hand was doing. What I am so grateful for is that the City of Commerce, Texas A&M University Commerce, and the Commerce Independent School District have all three leaned in at my request and said we must prevent these things from happening here. We have the ability, we have the skills, we have the talent, and we have the commitment to say we will not allow these things to be the downfall of our community. And so at this moment, these three entities are developing a memorandum of agreement that articulates how they train, how they work together, how they plan, how they respond in safety emergency incidents. They're reviewing what communication gaps are amongst their ranks. They are working deliberately and intentionally to say we will be inclusive by making sure that our counterparts are at the focus of what we do. What I appreciate about these three entities is that they said, Dr. Archie, one of the first things in this agreement is that above all, safety first. No politics, no isolated government. But when we fail and when we don't commit to this work, it is the community and the lives of our children and our employees and our people that are left most vulnerable. And so this is what inclusion looks like. This is what inclusion feels like. It's not just about one community, it's about all. And moving the needle forward to say, how are we collectively benchmarking this in ways that shows we commit to our part? And so this is where I ask you, City Council, I need you. I need you to say, this is our part. I need you to say, how are we eroding the lines that have divided us? Recognizing that the university has a leadership role in that, and we commit to it. But not just hold small, informal structures, but what are formal structures that we can create that says we are all at this one table? Whether that's a town and gown formal group, or there are structures and committees that we establish to say, when we lead, we will lead together. What I do know is that Texas A&M University Commerce cannot succeed without you. You are our partner. And so to the context of all of this, we recognize that there are roles, we recognize that there are differences. I always try to add this personal context to my presentation. And if you look, I talked about that Walk a Mile program earlier. If you look at that interesting guy in that photo, at the bottom of that photo, you will see lovely shoes. What I can say is that in walking a mile, I have earned the most respect for people who can pull that off Because unfortunately, I am not one of those people. But I have to acknowledge this by saying acknowledgement of another culture does not require the devaluing of our own. I'll read that once again. Acknowledgement of another culture does not require the devaluing of our own. I was no less a man because I choose to recognize the plight of women. I absolutely am a Christian, but I absolutely also support the values, the experiences, and the services of people who are Jewish, Muslim, and all other types of communities. I'm not challenged in my faith as a Christian. It does not make me less Christian to acknowledge the belief of someone else. And as an institution, we are leaning into that mantra to say there is a place at our table for all people, and how are we being intentional with creating the structures that identify that to be who we are. Lastly, we are perfectly designed for the outcomes we are receiving. We are perfectly designed for the outcomes we are receiving. If we think that we have obtained true inclusion, and even more so integration, keep doing what we're doing. Because what you're doing is getting us exactly what we have as outcomes. If there is an opportunity to say we need lean in more, are we truly serious enough to say I own that and we commit to it? There was a small pandemic called COVID that exposed us all, and the many areas where our silos have kept us from becoming that which we stated we wish to be. Do we have the courage to learn, to not revert back to the things that we were, and to say we will lean into this work and become more than what we have been? To each of you, I say thank you. Thank you for what you do every day. Although we can do more, you are the people that are on the front line. You are the people that make the decisions that impact everyone. And that role is very serious. The lives and the well-beings of the people who are part of this community rest in your hands with the decisions you make. And we understand that that is not always easy. And so for what you already do, and for what you already give, and how you do it, know that Texas A&M University Commerce appreciates you. Having said that, I apologize for the delay, but I do want to offer if there are any specific questions that you may have as of this time. Are there any comments? I will be glad to entertain. Howdy and Mayor and Chris, no, you don't get away from me. Unfortunately, we have meetings coming up, so I will see you very soon. But I want to, I would be remiss for not thanking them for leaning in, because they sincerely have. I've nudged quite a bit with some things. And what I can say is that they have answered every call, and it is my pleasure to partner with them.
Dr. Archie, I did include with your climate initiatives our response memo so that the council could see that.
Great. So again, we're showing you we're moving the work forward. Having a goal without a plan is a plan to fail. Moving it forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Archie. All right, item 11 on our agenda. Discuss and possible action on a resolution directing publication of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation and resolving other matters relating to this subject. Ms. Campbell, Finance Director.
All right, Mayor and Council, so this is a resolution to have, to publish our notice of intent to issue our certificates of obligation for Series 2023 bond that Jorge just went over with you for our plan of finance. This is only for us to publish it on our website, publish it into the Greenville Herald Banner, and what it does is it kind of specifies everything that what the bonds are for, how much we're going out for. It specifies the details of what those bonds are, and it lets our public know that we have the intent to go out for these bonds. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Campbell? Thank you very much. Item 12, first
No,
reading.
We gotta,
We have to-
Oh,
That is an
we need
action
to,
item.
we're recommending approval of that
Okay,
resolution.
sorry, I missed that part. All right, so do I have a motion to approve?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right, I move then that we move ahead with the recommendation on the notice of intention of issue of certificates of obligation that Jamie just discussed.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 12, first reading, discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending Chapter 22, Building and Building Regulations, Article 2, Building Code, Section 22-31, adopted to adopt 2018 International Building Codes, 2017 National Electric Code, and 2018 North Texas Council of Central Governments Amendments Option B, and providing for the effective date of April 2023. Mr. Harper, Assistant Director of Community Development.
Mayor, Council, this process started a year ago when we were notified that our upcoming ISO building grading schedule was about to happen. And at that time, he gave us about a month notice to fill out his questionnaire. At that point, we filled it out. He came by, and the number one thing he emphasized the most was that as long as your building codes are not within 6 years of the current code, your grade will come down. And when we did get that notice eventually in August, that was exactly the case and how it was weighted. Didn't matter what else we did on our staff. It was mainly just keeping the building codes within 6 years of adoption. So in May, we reached out to developers and contractors about their thoughts on the 2018, 2017 NEC, 2018 ICC, sorry. And we did not hear anything, and the responses were little to none. So at that point, we reached out to staff, we reached out to the fire department on their opinion on what codes we should go with and COG amendments. We came together with the plan. At that time, we came together with 2018, 2017, and the COG amendments for option B. And then we had our council workshop early this month with your recommendation of adding 30 extra days after the second reading of adoption to allow for time for contractors to adjust to the new codes. That's where we are right now.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Harper? There being none, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance?
Make a motion that we pass on the first reading.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Harper. Item 13, discussion and possible action on the amendment of an ordinance related to Chapter 90, Article 6, related to commercial vehicle routes. Mr. Lisenby, City Manager.
Mayor, Council, last month, we had the first reading of this ordinance to address an item that's been brought before us a number of times regarding the traffic routes that commercial vehicles are taking. And there had been some concern about how the old ordinance was worded and how it impacted our ability to do enforcement. And so we brought forward some revisions to that truck route ordinance to better define what are the truck routes, better define what are commercial vehicles, whether they're through trucks or delivery trucks. We had some input from the public. We actually had a small stakeholder group with some neighborhoods and got feedback and resulted in the ordinance that we presented last month. Our esteemed city attorney did what all good city attorneys did and pretended he was an English professor and marked up my ordinance, and I didn't cry. I wept, but he just made a couple of minor alterations to kind of clean it up a little bit. And so we have presented to you an updated version of that truck route that meets the approval of our esteemed attorney. And since I am not an attorney, I want to iterate my appreciation for his diligence. I don't even play one on TV. And so there's no substantive changes that he made, but it does raise one question. We have identified truck routes as Highway 11 coming in as Culver and 24 or 50 that heads north to south through town. And so that is the designated truck route for through trucks. So if they're traveling through Commerce, they're required to stay on those two streets and not go through our residential areas. The question came up of whether we can, because they can travel state highways whether we give them permission or not. And Park Street coming through town is a state highway. Live Oak, Washington, and Maine is a state highway. Our intention was to remove those routes from the truck route and make them stay on Main Highway 11 and Main 24. The question was whether we had the ability to actually force them off of those other state highways. And so that's part of the discussion, and you were going to check into that, Charles.
Yes, I think the way that it was presented to me and through the tiers, that we could designate the highways as part of our through truck route. And that said, I think the draft, and you had that in front of people, was kind of, I'm going to call it our collaboration, although if Howdy wants to put it on me, he can put it on me. But there's
Dr. Archie, I was inclusive of our attorney in this conversation.
That doesn't always happen. And I must say that this was my draft, and you all have it. And after some more discussion in Section 2 under A and B, we can remove that portion of language, and I've showed the city manager about designated U.S. highway or state highway, and really we'll stay with our own designated truck routes, which, as the manager provided. So with those small tweaks, I think we have something that we can work with. I think, I think there's been some discussion. This is not as perfectly enforceable as we would hope, because you don't always know if you're an officer where a truck has been, or maybe even where it's going. But this ordinance, as constructed, puts that burden, if you will, on the driver to convince. So I think it's a good ordinance. I would commend it to you. I know that the manager spent a lot of time on this, and yes, there were some attorney tears on this as well.
So our recommendation is the draft that you have, we would remove the reference to authorized U.S. and state highways and pull that out of the ordinance language. And so the result would be that for through commercial vehicles, meaning they started somewhere outside of Commerce and they're ending outside of Commerce and they're just driving through town on their way somewhere, they have to stay on Culver and Highway 24 and can't get off and travel through town to keep on their route. We want to be able to enforce that should we need to. And then if they're a delivery vehicle, means their end destination or their start destination is inside of our city limits, they travel that truck route and they exit at the closest intersection to where their point of origin or their point of destination is, so that they don't end up wandering all the way through town trying to figure out where they need to be and ultimately end up on residential streets. And so that's the only flexible conversation that we have on the document in front of you. What does not change is our designations along North Neal. That was the impetus of this whole conversation in the beginning. And so as it stands right now, commercial vehicles, even commercial vehicles that are making deliveries, are not allowed to travel down North Neal unless they are specifically moving a manufactured home from Legacy Homes. And so Legacy Homes would be the only entity that has permission to travel down North Neal as a commercial vehicle. Obviously, unless the delivery is to a home on North Neal, which is a very rare occasion. But the commitment remains, once TxDOT is able to revise the intersection at Park and Highway 71, then we'll revisit that. So this does not change any of our intentions along North Neal. It just flexes how we handle other trucks and their ability to move through town. We want them to remain on Culver and remain on 24 unless they're going directly to a delivery or a pickup and then leaving. And so with that, we'll answer any questions that you have.
At one point in time, it was mentioned that there might be some conflict between the directions provided by Google. Is that still an issue or concern?
It is, and we really don't have any way to overcome that. And so, as an example, if you're, for some reason, traveling from Greenville and need to get to Hydro Aluminum, and you put it in Google or Waze or Apple Maps, every time it's going to recommend you turn off 24 at Charity and travel Charity all the way across to Hydro Aluminum. Well, the problem is that S-curve on Charity, we have semi-trucks that get stuck there and they can't move any further. So we've got signs posted everywhere. You can't miss the fact that there's no through truck traffic, but they follow Google Maps instead of following the signs, and then they get stuck. I've tried at other cities to get Google Maps to change things, and it's been an effort and futility. So as long as drivers are following those maps, they're going to follow those routes. That's where our enforcement kicks in.
All right. So, are there any questions from Mr. Lisenby?
Is this going to do anything to address the issues that that citizen had?
On North Neal?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm.
It should improve a great deal.
Hopefully. It gives us the teeth to do enforcement if people don't follow this.
Can TxDOT do anything with Google, or can they contact and see if they have a little bit more pull than you do?
I've never seen them be any more successful than me.
All right. We have a motion to approve the second reading of the ordinance.
I move that we accept the second reading of the ordinance with the removal of section 2A.
The language about designated U.S. and
Right.
state highways. Yeah.
I second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 14, City Manager's Report. Mr. Lisenby.
I will claim one. To me, it's a minor victory. To others, it may not be a minor victory. Until about a week ago, if you did a basic Google search for Haru Pipe, which is one of the manufacturers that we have located in town, if you did a basic Google search for Haru Pipe, it showed up Haru Pipe, Commerce, Texas, and the picture they threw up there was a KK march from Washington, D.C. and had absolutely nothing to do with Haru Pipe. And so I reached out to Google, and they changed the picture. So we'll claim victory there against Google. But how that picture got there, we have absolutely no idea. But public input feedback, we did have the comments from Ms. Vickers. She has been here before. We don't publicly comment on investigations that have or that may be ongoing. And so she makes some allegations that have been reviewed and have been looked at. But the one thing that I do want to very publicly say is that the City of Commerce does not receive money or funding from the Commerce Housing Authority. There's no money transferred from them to us except for when they pay their water bill. And we actually pay them for some streetlight fees. But there's very little financial connection between the City of Commerce and Commerce Housing Authority, and we have no jurisdiction over their policies and their eviction processes. But I do publicly want to say we are not receiving funding from that organization. $24 a month is what we pay for streetlights there, so it's not like we're breaking the bank. And so with that, I will allow Ms. Jamie to come up and give our finance update.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. So tonight we're going to start looking at our sales tax. One thing that I noticed about January is that it's almost exactly where it was last January. We are coming in slightly under budget, which is okay because we've been hitting above budget previously in the year. As of January, we've collected around $544,000 in sales tax revenue so far this year. But there really wasn't any kind of outlier that I saw looking through their detailed analysis. Looking at our top 10 categories, Again, everything seems so close to where it was last year. One thing I know that somebody up on the dais may want to ask about is the January 2020 retail and why that one was so high. And that is only because it's a payment that's only made twice a year, but it's typically made in February. And so in 2020, it was just made a month early. Other than that, when I went and looked vendors by vendors, everybody, almost everybody was within dollars, hundreds of dollars of where they were last year in January. If we look at retail trade, online purchasing is still strong. It's still growing from where we were over the last 3 previous years in January, which is great for us. And again, our department stores, right where we were before. Any questions on retail trade? On the accommodations and food, so the difference between last year and this year is less than $50. But
Wow.
what's different is the split. It's completely different than it was last year. So full service restaurants was 46% as compared to this year, which is 43. Limited service was 25% as it is compared to 35%. And mobile food trucks were 11% last year, where this year it's 9%. But we still got sales tax revenue within $50. So I just thought that was crazy. But but we're right neck and neck where it is in January. So I don't know. It's crazy. Don't know what's going on. Any questions on sales tax?
What is limited service restaurants?
Limited services are majority is going to be your fast food. Any other questions? Okay. So moving over to property tax. At this time last year, we had reached about 74% collections. And this year, I'm seeing a little bit of a lag with our collections just compared to last year. But we have also received more revenue this year than we have last year, which is anticipated because our home values have been increasing. So as of January of 2023, we've reached 69% of collections and almost $2.7 million in revenue. And then in our delinquent taxes, we've actually reached about 10% of our delinquent taxes in collections, which is, last year we had only reached 5%. And so as we see properties being purchased and land being purchased and maybe old delinquent lots being purchased, they're paying off old taxes and things like that. And so those things are getting paid off. One other thing that I'll remind you is after January, so last year's taxes are now considered delinquent. And so people still may be on payment plans and things like that for their property taxes of last year. And that may also be contributing to why we're seeing a 10% collections on our delinquent taxes. And again, we're not probably won't see any more abatements on property taxes. We will in the beginning of next fiscal year as more of those properties in our neighborhood empowerment zone finish and their valuations get updated in the Hunt CAD database. Anybody have any questions for property tax?
I will indicate we had entered into an incentive agreement with Nexi Manufacturing for their purchase and move into the old Clavidian building. There were some performance numbers that they had to hit in order for us to give them abatements. They did not hit those numbers, and so we're not providing any abatements.
Talking about abatements and back on the sales tax, we will start seeing quarterly sales tax abatements for Tractor Supply and for the Bloomfield homes that you guys entered into
Last year.
2020 or 2021?
Last year.
Last year? 2022. I don't know what year I'm in. The audit starts on Monday, so I don't know what year I'm living in right now. And so we will be paying those out quarterly. And so hopefully in March, when I give you March numbers, you'll start seeing what those sales tax abatements look like and how it's affecting our numbers. So.
And those sales tax, those abatements come out of what fund?
So basically,
Fund.
the general fund, they pay the sales taxes in and we rebate a portion back to them.
But I did budget for that.
Well, I know you did.
And so, and they won't affect the EDC side of the sales tax. They'll only affect ours. And so after they pay it, then I will almost like create an invoice for them.
Right.
And then pay them a check.
And as a reminder, on the Bloomfield homes, we won't start seeing that probably until they begin construction on houses. But the arrangement we did with Bloomfield Homes, as a large builder, they self-report and self-turn in sales tax to the state, which means they get to designate where the sales tax is applied. And so as they start building 110 homes and they start buying all of the raw material going into those homes, very likely they're not going to be buying any of that material in Commerce. They buy in bulk from somewhere else. But we will get the credit for those sales tax, even though they didn't buy them here. They're building here, so they get to apply that sales tax to us. And so the incentive was they get half of that sales tax, we keep half of the sales tax, and the EDC gets all of their portion. So that will be a pretty significant boom to all of us for that.
Right, because otherwise we wouldn't be getting any of it.
We wouldn't get any of it.
It's a nice little gift.
That'll
right
help
there.
pay off what we owe them.
Any other questions for your financials? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Molly?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Before we get started on a few upcoming events that I have for you all, I did want to report that following you all calling the election in January, we had our filing period from, I believe it was January 18th through February 17th. So this past Friday at 5 o'clock, if an individual wanted to file for a place on the council to run for place 1 or place 3, they would have had to file. We had Mr. Tony Henry and Miss Stephanie Muller, both of our incumbents, were our only candidates to file for place 1 and place 3. So they are stuck with us for 3 more years. So you will see next month we'll bring to you an ordinance to cancel that election. I believe the school board also had unopposed candidates for places 4, 5, and 6. Is that right, Ms. Reel? So I believe they'll cancel their election as well. For upcoming events, we have the Commerce Lions Club is doing a Texas Hold'em tournament at Sandhills Country Club. That event will be March 4th at 6:30. I believe Mr. Ayers, your lovely wife, Tina, is on Lions Club. So if you have questions, certainly let us know.
Don't look to me.
Don't look to Jim, but look to Miss Tina. I will turn the Bark in the Park event with the Thalians Culture Club over to Miss Muller.
Yes, this year, for the third project service project that the Thalian Culture Club does, is we're going to do sponsoring the Bark in the Park. And it's a drive-through fundraiser, and we ask that donations of any kind of items for animals will be given for the animal shelter. We're also going to have, that's going to be on the side where the splash pad is going to be. And on the other side, we're also asking for monetary donations. That's going to the Friends of the Dog Park, which they are going to be looking at a couple of little things that they need to fix on the dog park or add to the dog park, as well as we're going to be helping to support the K-9 unit for the Commerce Police Department. And anything else that they have left over, then they're going to give that to the animal shelter as well. I do have to give a shout out to the animal shelter leader. What's his name? Brandon. He is very innovative. He went out and he talked to somebody, I don't know who the lady is, that is on TikTok, that is a big animal advocate. And he asked if she would come and visit our animal shelter. She said, no, I'm not coming to Texas, but I will make a big deal about this on our website. And she did a video and everything, and we ended up having all these donations being made. And how much do we actually receive?
Do we know what the final dollar was?
I think it was like.
I was told it was near $15,000 value of total donations.
So we have to give him a big shout out, you know, getting it out there. And then we also, he has set up on Amazon a wish list. And so you can go right out there. In fact, on the flyer has a QR for the animal shelter. So if you don't have an idea of what you want to get them or anything, you can just do it on Amazon and it'll be delivered to the animal shelters. And that's on March the 6th from 4 to 6.
The Northeast Texas Children's Museum has their annual silent auction coming up on Monday, March 27th. Ms. Thompson, do you want to provide us with some more details on that?
Yes, this is the annual auction. I think this is about the 7th year. I'm not sure on that. Not only is it just the auction, which is a big fundraiser for the Children's Museum, it's also a very popular social event. We always have a very good crowd, and want to ask everyone to come out. It's going to be pretty much the same. It'll be the silent auction plus the market, which is home goods, baked goods. It's very popular. They go really, really quick. When those doors open, there's a lot of people that just make a beeline to get all those home cooked items. But that will be on Monday, March the 27th from 6 to 8. Any member of the museum board will have the tickets. I have them, Stephanie has them, Ms. Rill has those tickets, or you can go to the museum and they will have them at the museum. We will have not just the tickets, we're going to have a raffle. The raffle will be 4 $250 gift cards that are being provided or sponsored by 4 of our local banks, and that is also that raffle also brings in significant money for the museum.
I heard the Children's Museum is doing a new dinosaur exhibit.
Yeah.
Yes. And then we included, related to the TxDOT agreement that we discussed earlier tonight, the Rally Round Emma Dean event that the city is assisting with Ms. Hawkins and several others. That'll be March 25th, which is a Saturday. And I believe they'll kick off about 8:30 a.m. with their 5K. We'll be sharing this information to social media as we iron out some more details. But there's a lineup of those events, and we hope that everyone can join us so we can raise some money for this family. That's all I have.
Thank you, Molly. Mayor, Council, as we move through just the next couple of items on the report, on the personnel side, I committed to try to bring to you monthly some numbers on vacancy and staffing levels, and so we can report that we're fully staffed in 5 departments, which is not always capable of being said. However, we do have some vacancies. As of today, we have 4 vacancies in the police department, a part-time officer, a patrol sergeant, and 2 patrol officers. However, I do believe we've already got notice of a couple of more that are going to be leaving in the near future. And so that number of 4 will climb up to a bigger number probably by next month. Public utilities, we have a vacancy at the wastewater treatment plant. In Public Works, we need an equipment operator and a maintenance worker. And then the fire department, our full-time staff is fully staffed, but we're looking for 3 part-time firefighters. And so we do have remaining some staffing challenges, mostly in the police department, and that's not unique to Commerce. That's true in departments everywhere. I want to move, and I'll try to be as quick as I can, but we've got some project updates. And so it's been a while since I've given you a full update on all of our projects because it's been in a lagging state for some of these projects. But within the packet, the first page is, as a reminder, our 5-year capital improvements program and how we're looking to stage projects and the funding. But the next page is one you've seen. It's front and back, and those are all the projects that were within our FY22 capital improvements program. So I'll walk through those briefly. The animal shelter project had an initial budget of $1.5 million. We did recently increase that budget to $3 million. And so we are under design. If you'll recall, that project is being delivered through a design-build program. Design is still underway. We're looking to complete design by the end of this summer, probably June, July timeframe. With a design build, you do have the ability to begin construction before design is completed. So hopefully we'll be able to find some ways to start construction early and get that project moving. Public library, we've had some ongoing conversations about that. Budget remains at $800,000. Design is complete. We actually could bid that project out tomorrow. However, there's been some flooring concerns. And so starting on Monday the 27th, we have an asbestos abatement contractor that's beginning. They think it'll take 2 or 3 weeks to get that asbestos abated and removed. Then we'll know exactly what the scope of work is. So we're probably going to bid that work out this late spring, early summer, with construction happening shortly after that. Ivory Moore improvements were completed. The inclusive playground at City Park was completed. The splash park at City Park remains under construction. Spoke with their project manager today. Depending on what the rain does, the concrete subcontractors will be here on the ground on Monday. But if it rains all week and it's a sloppy mess, but they're completing the dirt and getting all the elevations set, they should start forming up concrete next week. We remain on schedule to have that completed by the end of the school year so that kids can get wet this summer. Downtown improvements, we adopted the downtown improvement plan and we submitted our first of several grant applications. The first application was for about $4 million. That would fund all of the sidewalk and streetscape improvements to our downtown. That grant application was through the Transportation Alternatives Program, I think, Alan. And a little bit of bittersweet news. That program has $250 million available for applicants, and they had about $3 billion worth of applications submitted. So it will be a highly competitive process, but we did find out this week we made the first cut. So we're still in the game, but that game lasts till September, so we won't find out in the coming weeks any final news. We're going to try again in 2023 to look at submitting a grant application for our comprehensive plan, and so that grant application will be submitted sometime later this year. Flipping that page over, the airport fuel farm, as you'll recall, we had designed that project previously. Our airport is a general aviation airport, and we've had no fuel services, I want to say, for 5 years. The old fuel tank failed a number of years ago, and there's been no fuel available at our airport. So we designed a full replacement and construction of a new fuel facility. We had allocated, I believe, $200,000 to $230,000 for that project. We only received one bid, and it was for over $900,000. So it was way outside of our budget. And I've found out that every airport in Texas that's trying to do fuel farms, yeah, it just decided to make it really, really expensive. So we had a FAA grant program that we looked at trying to pursue that would have provided funding for the project. Unfortunately, we couldn't really spin it. That whole grant program was a climate initiative. It had to be a green energy program that reduced the energy footprint of your airport. And so we tried to spin it and say, we don't have any fuel, so that means they have to fly further to get fuel and then fly back. So if we put in a fuel system, that's less distance that they're flying, and therefore we're contributing to saving the environment. They didn't like that spin completely, and so it didn't fly. Well played. We're looking at some other potential funding options, and so we haven't killed the project yet. But we're looking at some alternatives, but we've got to find the funding. For the FY22 street projects, we talked a little bit about this earlier. Design is nearing completion. We'll most likely be bidding that construction in the May-June timeframe to award construction contracts. Construction will likely happen this summer and go into the fall. Raw water motor control project out at Lake Tawakoni is finished and was completed in December. Major milestone for our team. The water treatment plant filter rehab remains under construction. We're about halfway finished. The 3 filters that were not operable have been fully rehabbed. We're just waiting on some valves to be delivered in the March, April timeframe. And so then we can get those 3 filters up and running, and then take the other 3 filters down and get those rebuilt. So within this calendar year, our water treatment plant will have full capacity restored. Wastewater treatment plant pump rehab, that project was completed, and the associated supplemental environmental project has been approved, and we're finishing up the paperwork. The final sheet that you have is going to be a new document for the next round of capital improvement projects and how they're tracking. And so what we have been proposing, and we'll talk in more detail in our workshop in March, the fiscal 23 street projects would be the East Sterling Heart and Oak Lane. We're looking to do about 9 to 10 months of design. That'll put us bidding that construction out early in 2024, with the potential of doing construction in the second half of 2024. If we go ahead and start the engineering on Monroe Street, which is the fiscal 24 slate of projects, if we start that design now, it's also going to complete in sometime in early 2024, the design process. However, we would not bid construction out until 2025. And so that's what we're looking at for those 2 streets. Finally, on the public utilities projects for this capital improvement year, the East Oak Creek utilities, when Bloomfield Homes came in addition to the sales tax incentive, we were able to work with them. We did do a 380 agreement to provide some incentive on the utility side. And so our commitment is whatever their cost of water and sewer infrastructure, we would fund half of that. And so phase 1 to support 110 homes is right at $1 million worth of work. And so if we're going to fund half of that, we've got to put in $500,000. We are not committed to giving any of those funds until they sell their first home. And they are telling us they're probably going to start home construction this summer. So it could be by the end of the calendar year. It may roll into next year before we have to commit any of those funds. But that's included in this year's notice of intent that you just gave to issue certificates. We'll have the funding for that.
Was there any kind of relationship with the streets?
The streets internal to their subdivision, we did not participate, and the stormwater improvements within their subdivision, we did not participate.
Okay.
They're putting in full concrete streets and full underground stormwater completely at their own expense. We got to tell them how we wanted it to be designed, but they got to build it.
Underground electrical streetlights?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to go back. Their civil plans only required them to show me water, sewer, and stormwater. I don't remember if electrical was in, so I don't know off the top of my head. We can research that. Included in this is the Washington Street utilities. As we begin reconstruction of Washington Street, we have to replace all the water and sewer that are underneath there as well. And so that design continues to finish up, and we'll bid sometime later this year. Water Master Plan, we've talked about that. This is also something that I'll probably put on a future workshop so that we understand the full context of what we're trying to do with this Water Master Plan. But we released a request for qualifications back in January. We received 6 very competitive submittals from firms. And we are conducting interviews with the top 3 firms on March the 6th to make a determination of who we want to hire for that master plan. The 3 firms we're interviewing, Friesen Nichols gave us a very competitive submittal, a firm called Garver. I've worked with Garver before on airport stuff. Garver is the engineer that did our taxiway extension and worked with TxDOT Aviation. And then a firm called Enprotech Hibbs & Todd is another engineering firm that's going to be interviewed. So we'll interview those firms on March the 6th. Hopefully have a recommendation at our regular March meeting for a firm to do that planning study. Bishop Street Lift Station is one of the few lift stations we have. I won't go into all of the gory details, but lift stations have all the sewage flow into a pit, and there's a pump at the bottom of that pit that pumps it and moves it on, and that pump is in failure. And so at least a couple of times a month, we have staff that have to crawl down in that pit, which is not a pleasant experience. And so we want to rebuild and replace that lift station. The engineering team has been selected, and so we'll start that design process soon. And then finally, at the wastewater treatment plant, we're not under enforcement, but in our last annual inspection, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the TCEQ, pointed out and reminded us of something that we already knew was an issue. As you treat, one of the first stages of treatment process for wastewater flows is taking that water and those flows through a series of what are called fine screens. It's metal mesh with holes, and you just run the water through. Surprisingly, we get plastic toys, we get paper products, we get fabric products. It's amazing what people will flush down the toilet that ends up at our sewage plant. And you don't want all that trash going through the biological treatment process that exists, so we screen it out at the front. And all of those screenings get dumped off to the side. You have to take the water out of them, and then you send them to the landfill. The equipment that was originally installed at the plant to perform that function hasn't worked in years. And so we've kind of had a alternative workaround that the state has accepted us using. They've warned us that they're no longer going to accept us using that alternative workaround. And so we are completely removing the trash from the wastewater flows. It's just what we do with that trash once we've removed it. We've got to address that. And so we did a preliminary study looking at the equipment and the way our plant's designed. You're looking at around $250,000 of investment to correct that problem. So we're going to start the design process. The design process is not going to cost $250,000, but we've already begun the process of what it's going to take to solve that. The state at this point just required a letter to say we acknowledge there's a problem and we're putting a plan together, and we gave them that letter, and the state's happy for now. But if we don't do something, in a couple of years the state won't be happy anymore, and when the state's not happy, nobody's happy. And so that's the final project in this round of capital programs. And so with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Mr. Lissaby? There being
That
none.
concludes our manager's report.
All right. There being none, then I just need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Meeting ended, 7:57.